Hello, this is John from Revit for Interior Designers. And in today's tutorial, we're going to cover graphic display options to produce graphic presentations for your Revit projects. This is part of a larger course that we offer on our website, the Commercial Office Interiors course, and that information is in the description below. Currently on the screen, I've got a scene, a perspective set up here. And we're going to walk through the different options you have to revise this screen in terms of its graphics. So we'll start here at the bottom of the screen. Here are the typical options you have. You have hidden line, you've got shaded, you've got consistent colors, you've got textures, and you got realistic. And realistic takes a second to kick into gear. So we'll start with hidden line, for example. So let's say we want to modify the hidden line style. So here, when you go into the graphic display button, you can go into graphic display options here. And this is the current style that's presently activated. So we're using hidden line. Now the way you use this menu is some of the options in this menu may or may not be available based on the type of style you choose. So it takes a little experimentation on your part to figure out which combinations of tools are available to manipulate the scene. So for example, here under hidden line, this option here for show edges is not available because it's all the edges, smooth lines with anti-aliasing right here. And what that does is if curvilinear objects in your scene are appearing sort of stepped, you see here like kind of the stepping effect here, this will smooth out the lines, but it'll also make the lines bolder. So it's great for curvilinear objects. So it's currently turned on. If I turn that off and hit OK, then here, if I look a little closer here, these little jagged edges here appear. And depending how close you are to your graphics, your presentation graphics, that may or may not be an issue. So in here, if I turn this on, then it tends to smooth out all of those jagged edges there. So if I activate that and hit apply, then you see it smoothed them out. It's a subtle effect, but it might be important to your presentation. So that's one tool you can use here. Next one is transparency, and this will take the entire scene and make it obviously transparent. So if I turn this up, hit apply, the scene becomes sort of semi-transparent. Silhouettes is basically, hit apply to restore this. Silhouettes is a tool that's available. And it lets you take the edges of the objects in the scene and sort of enhance them, make them bolder or darker. And so if I look at silhouettes, they've got a style here called wide lines. And so watch what happens here. Watch the very edges of these objects here, the edge of this wall, the bottom of that countertop, for example, using the wide line style. I hit apply, and nothing happens. Well, it could be the fact that we don't have our line weights turned on in Revit. So up here at the top of the screen, or TL for shortcut, is the thick lines command. And if I type TL or choose that button there, it activates the line weights. And again, if you zoom in here, you'll see here that the edges here are now heavier. Those are outlines. And if I turn it off, here is what you get without the outlines. This is a preview of what it'll look like if it were to print. So here I've exaggerated the edges and made the lines a little more bold. And again, that's also an option available in graphic displays. So you can choose that. Now, if you want, you can choose your own line style here. And I've chosen that here, for example, John's realistic view. I hit apply. And then I made the lines even bolder yet here, for example. You can make your own line styles to this menu. And you do that by simply choosing the option at the very bottom, Edit New. Choose here, New. It adds it to the list of line styles. At the very bottom here, you get line weights. You've got 1 through 16. 1 is razor thin, 16 is extra thick. This is the edge color of the line. And this is the line style, whether it's a solid line, dash lines, a bunch of dots, what have you. They exist here in this list. Very similar to AutoCAD. This line is very heavy. It's a 6 line weight. And so this makes the edges very bold. Let's revert back to, let's say, for example, medium lines here. And it's less dominant here in this design, for example. Go back to here, go to graphic display options, and let's move down the list. Shadows. So shadows is typically activated on the screen interface at the very bottom here. And it's the little bulb here with the light bulb next to it. And it says shadows are off. If I click, it turns shadows on. And this is a byproduct of the, let's say, darkness of the shadows vis-a-vis the graphic display options menu. And so these are the shadows that are turned on. And if I go back into graphic display options, I can see that that option here has been activated here. So if I turn it off, hit apply, then you won't get the shadows. So you can turn them on in this menu as well. Another option here is ambient shadows, and this adds a sort of an effect that adds shadows to the intersections between various vertical and horizontal planes. So if I use this, for example, you see this sort of cloudiness added to the scene here, and it gives the scene more three-dimensional quality. And you can use these in concert. You can use the ambient shadows with the cast shadows together. And so if that was happening here, you choose them both and hit apply, then this is what you get. Now, ultimately, you might want to decide to make the scene brighter or darker based on those values, and there's additional options to do that. But ambient shadows are not part of the interface here at the bottom of the screen. Let's turn those off for 1 second and go into Sketchy Lines, and let's see if it's available. So just see if you can activate this tool. It is available under Hidden Lines, and again, I need to hit the apply button to see the effect of turning off my shadows here, for example. So Sketchy Lines is basically a hand drafted technique. So jitter is basically how nervous the person is when they're drafting with their pen or pencil. So if I turn it up, you see the lines get wavier. It adds a level of imperfection to your design to make it look more hand drawn. If I tone it down, it tones it down a little bit. Extensions, as you all know, if you ever drafted by hand, when lines come together at their intersections, those points aren't exactly perfect. They tend to overlap, sometimes intentionally. So if I turn this up, notice that when these horizontal vertical lines meet one another at their corners, they're going to hyperextend past each other with this extension tool turned on. Hit apply. And you see here these lines stick out right there. And you can tone it down, for example, and bring it back and reduce its effect. But it's a drafting technique. If you want to show your drawings as hand-drawn, feel free to use this technique. I will turn that off. Depth queuing we won't get into. Lighting is another tool that's available. Now again, with all these tools, they're all contingent on what style you've chosen. And so with Hidden Line, some of these tools may or may not work. So you have to run some tests. So I tend to go to the extremes from 0% to 100%. 0%, hit apply. Did anything change? Yes or no? That tool, in this case, is deactivated. Although the lever works, the tool does not for Hidden Line style. Maybe another style will activate that tool. But in this case, they have no effect on the screen whatsoever. If I turn shadows on, for example, just as a quick test, 0% here is the sun, 100% is here. Did anything change? No, there's been no effect. So try ambient. Ambient is 0. Hit apply, no effect. Go to 100%, hit apply, no effect. shadows. Let's try that with ambient shadows turned on. 100%, hit apply. Now, that might be the byproduct of turning on the ambient. So let's check this again. At 0%, hit apply. Nothing changed. At 100%, hit apply. Nothing changed. So this has no effect on ambient or cast shadows. So understand that is one of the drawbacks. Now, shadows themselves, and let's turn off ambient for a second here. Let's look at shadows. Shadows themselves, if I turn this up to 100%, this will affect the darkness of the shadows. So hit apply. You see, you get a very different graphic effect. If you begin to tone this down, you can begin to display the scene and the shadows become lighter and lighter. And so as I come down to here, for example, at 20%, it looks like this. If I turn this off and use ambient shadows only, hit apply. Let's see if there's any effect here. So if I turn this all the way up, hit apply, nothing happens, turn it to 0. There's no effect. This has nothing to do with ambient shadows whatsoever. You have to run these tests based on each style and determine which one creates an effect. And obviously in this case, this has no effect on ambient shadows. It does affect cast shadows. So you might want to choose a value of cast shadows that creates a desired effect for a black and white presentation. Maybe you're at a design where you've created the interior features of your design, but you haven't chosen materials yet, or you don't want to display those to your client yet. You want to nail down the design architecturally. And so in this case, that's what we've done here. We've created a black and white image to present a perspective of a given room, but we don't so much care about materials. At some point, you will care about materials. At that point, you can create another round of presentations, which we'll do in a second. Realistic has no effect on the scene. Background does have an effect on the scene. And the background here is anything behind your image, outside basically, outside of these windows, for example. Now, I will run a demonstration here without the ceilings or the roof or walls, so you can see what's happening outdoors. So let's hit OK. Let's type VG, Visibility Graphics. It's also here in the menu under Properties. You choose, let's do that for a second here. You go here and it says Visibility Graphics Overrides. You're going to use this quite a bit. So choose that button there or type VG as a shortcut. And let's turn off walls. Highlight any line, choose W for walls, it jumps down. Uncheck walls, type C for ceilings, uncheck ceilings. Walls and ceilings, R for roof. Scroll down to roof, uncheck roof, hit apply, they all disappear. So let's use this as a test to see what's happening in the background. So back to visibility graphics, display the options. Let's use the background. Here you have the sky. What does that look like? So hit apply. There's the Revit sky. You can't change it. Here you've got the ground plane here. The ground is this gray color here at the bottom here. And the sky is up there. And this is based on the location of the sun in your scene. So you've got the sky here as an option. You got gradient as another option. Hit apply. And so what you have is the ground plane. And again, this line right here is your horizon. That's where your eyes are at in a perspective. So you're going to want to make sure that in whatever you do, the horizon is along this edge here. And it's about at the top of that coffee maker there. Right around there is where the horizon should be. Make a note of that. Ground, just above the ground, what they call horizon, and the sky. Feel free to modify these accordingly. So for example here, if I exaggerate the very top of the screen, sky, make it very dark, it'll go from this very dark color down to the horizon. Hit apply, or hit OK, hit apply, and you can begin to see it change here in the sky. If you want to have a early morning sunrise and the sun is beginning to show up above the horizon, feel free to add some yellow to the bottom of the screen. You don't want to add too bright of a color there, but hit apply and you can begin to see the yellowness coming up above the horizon. This looks a little odd, by the way. So we'll go back to white for the time being, hit apply, and this is the effect you're after. Again, feel free to adjust these colors and their darkness and brightness scales here, or simply enter RGB value, RGB, red, green, and blue, and adjust this accordingly from the color map, from the tray, or these color books where you can choose a Pantone color and get a Pantone effect. Hit OK. The last option is image. And what image allows you to do is pick a photograph on the internet, download it into your project folder, and then superimpose it in the background. So I did a Google search for, let's say, a park with lots of trees in Google, and I found a picture. I downloaded that picture onto my computer, and I placed it in a folder, and here I will customize the picture. So for example, here's the picture I've downloaded. Now, originally, when you choose picture, there is no picture in here, so it'll allow you to search for the picture. But since I've already chosen one, it shows up here. And notice here, this was originally 0, for example, and it's going to stretch the picture left to right, top to bottom on my perspective. I hit apply, and there's the picture. Remember the conversation we had about the horizon. This picture is going to look very odd and unrealistic in your perspective because your eyes and your brain sense that something is off. In this case, you cannot see the horizon. Clearly, there's a perspective in here, and the horizon, again, is just above that coffee maker, around right here. So the ground should be around this level here. It doesn't show up here. So you might need to go back to customize and move the picture up vertically. In this case, I figured out that 1 1/8 puts it in the right spot. If I hit apply, it moves it up vertically on the screen. And when I hit apply here, you'll see it move up. And that's about right. Your eye is at the horizon. This picture matches your perspective. Hugely important to make sure you get those two together to work to add realism to your scene. So now this is correct. And we're done. So go back to VG. I'll grab everything here and uncheck and check this box, turn everything back on. And there outside the window, that is the realistic location of the picture in this scene. And we've gone through all the effort of manipulating the scene to look this way. If you want this picture to be black and white, I suggest you bring it into Photoshop or Canva and convert it into a black and white image, and then use that picture in the background so it matches the coloration of your perspective. Now, it took some time to go through those options to arrive at this design. And so at any given time, you can record those settings in Revit for future use. And you can use those rules that are recorded to enforce your design style on a given scene and use it in many other scenes. It's a great tool. So if you go back to graphic display options here at the very bottom of the screen, once you're done with all these ingredients, you choose Save a View Template. And so this will record all the settings you have on the computer screen. So if I choose that button there, you give it a name. So for example, John's Kitchen, black and white. Maybe I want to say it's a 3D view, 3D, for example, just to be clear. So I created a template, hit apply, and then the template will record all these settings here. Now, there's a lot of information here on the screen. This is recording the scale of the drawing, level of detail. VG is visibility graphics. You know VG, the menu that allows you to turn objects on and off. Well, these are all visibility graphics and all the menus here. At the bottom here, these are your graphic display options. Things like the display mode here. And so all those menus have been recorded because they're all blue and checked here, assuming you need to record them. They're checked. You can check others if you like. And over here it's called John's Black and White 3D. I hit OK. I hit OK. Now, although you made the template, it doesn't keep someone from changing the screen. So for example, here, someone could open your file, go into here, and launch a shaded view as an example. Or maybe they will make the ambient shadows turned off, and suddenly your scene looks completely different. Or maybe you've forgotten what the original settings were that we liked in this presentation. So that's where templates come in. Because the templates were recorded, all the settings were recorded, and you can apply those settings to your scene here under Properties. You go down to here under View Template, click on that button there, and place your template into the properties of the scene. Hit OK, and then lo and behold, your properties return. So now all the settings that were recorded are no longer available in this scene. So someone were to open this view in an office environment and go to here, all these tools have been deactivated. They can no longer check and modify any of these settings here because they're all deactivated. If you need to revise those settings, you physically have to go into the template and revise them there. So the template is here, click, and which one we'd like to revise. Maybe I want to change the style from hidden line to shaded. Once you hit apply, then that's the style. But although we know that it's supposed to be hidden, hit apply, hit OK. So these buttons here become the trigger to change the scene. It's no longer on the interface. So what's nice about this is I can return to a floor plan here, first level view. Let's zero in on this kitchen yet again. Let's say I want to do a view looking down the length of this kitchen island here. So I go to the 3D tool here and I create a camera and I stand here looking this way. And this is another presentation I like to produce. I might want to choose, obviously, I might want to change the crop box here to display a little more information, show more of the ceiling. And then I can apply the template to this scene. The same template, so different perspective, same template. So here, view template, launch this, launch the black and white template, hit apply, hit OK, and lo and behold, the template is now activated. Now, you might realize that in this scene, there are certain things that are turned on that weren't available in the other scene. Like, for example, the CAD drawings here are superimposed on this file. It looks like the image outside may have moved vertically. Those are certain things that affect the perspective that you're in. So you might want to tweak your graphic display options so that they are available per scene and they're not recorded in the template. So let's basically tell the CAD drawing to be part of the template, but let's make sure the background can be changed on the fly. So go to your template here, and then let's deactivate the background. So now I should be able to change the background individually per view because it's no longer part of the template. And then let's go into visibility graphics here and go under visibility graphics override import, which is the menu we're familiar with, which turns off imported drawings. Let's turn off all the CAD drawings. Let's make that part of the recording. They're all turned off. Hit apply, hit OK, hit apply, and OK. And let's make sure and don't forget to check the box to make it part of the template. The box is checked here. So hit apply. Those rules are now been applied to this scene. The CAD drawing is no longer available. There's some other things here that are available here. I might want to turn off all the annotations, for example, scope boxes, column grid lines, what have you. Again, go to the template, turn them off under the appropriate menu, and record them as part of the template. In this case, the background is now available here. It's no longer part of the template. So if I go into graphic display options, it'll be the only option that I can actually change on the scene itself because it's no longer part of the template. So I'll go customize, and I might want this to be, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. Hit OK. And let's see if that's about the size, the height of the coffee. Yeah, it's about the right. My eye level is about here. I'm about 5'6", so around right there is 5 feet. This is 10-foot ceiling, that's about right. So those perspective images outside really help reinforce the scale of the scene. With that picture being too high, it makes the room look shorter. And so in this case, we've resolved that problem. Those work hand in hand. And so now we can make adjustments to this scene, and I can save this perspective here. I can right click on this and rename it and give it a name that can return to later, or place it on a sheet. Let's go back to our kitchen perspective here. And let's go through the final additional options that are available. I'm going to turn off the template here because I want to be able to change it. So I'll choose it, hit none. I want to be able to manipulate this scene without any interference. I'm going to close all these tabs here, use a little button there. So go here, graphic display options. Let's look at the others. What else is possible? So we've got, and let's start off by turning off the shadows for a second. I don't want any interference from the shadows. Let's go into shaded mode. Hit apply. This is shaded mode. And so all the materials you create in Revit have a shaded mode under the material editor. These are those colors. However, there's an artificial light in Revit that determines what side is facing the artificial light source and what side is not facing that light, which will show up darker. So this wall here, for example, is chipboard. One side is bright, the other part's in shade because of this artificial light source. That's what shaded mode does. Now, in shaded mode, you can decide to turn off the edges. Turn off the edges, hit apply, edges turn off. Now here, you'll lose the definition here between these edges here. And so this might work better with the silhouette turned on, with the shadows turned on. You'll have to decide if that's something you want to include. So let's turn on shadows and let's see if that helps us. Helps us a little, kind of add some three-dimensional quality to the scene. Yet these edges here aren't very well defined along the vertical wall and the back wall there. So let's try ambient shadows, hit apply. That seems to help. The scene's a little on the dark side, but it seems to help. These are options under shaded techniques here. They have the silhouetting turned off. It's not available because the edges are not available. With the edges turned on, this becomes available. So again, these tools work hand in hand. You'll have to try each menu and see what's available and what's not available in the menu. So in this case, this is available because I've got the edges turned on. Hit apply, you'll see the edges there. Again, if I turn that off, which is only available for shaded, you can see what the effect is. I can still see the edge of that wall there. So maybe I'll keep it. Sketchy lines, not available. Deactivated. Lighting, let's turn the sun up 100%. Hit apply and let's see if there's any changes. The scene got brighter. So the sun does have an effect on shaded views. The artificial light source outside can influence the interiors of this perspective at 100% versus 0. And some variation thereof, you'll decide on the look and feel that you're after. Let's bring that down to 0 and let's try ambient by itself. What does ambient do? Pull it up to 100, hit apply. Ambient seems to do something as well. So now you have ambient and the sun affecting your scene. So you're going to want to experiment in terms of which one you're going to deploy and what value you want to use for each. Assume these are percentages. This is 100%. So ambient is like a dimmer switch. So you can tone it down and dim down the overall brightness contrast of the scene. And then the sun will ultimately brighten the shaded areas of this, like the ceiling was very dark earlier. You can see it becoming brighter and brighter and brighter. At some point, it'll just look very washed out. So you can feel free to adjust those settings to your liking to get to a place that you'd like to present this design. All the colors are attributed to the materials. The materials decide what colors appear on the scene. And then finally, shadows. If I turn off shadows completely, you get no shadows on the ground. If I make shadows 100%, you'll get 100% darkness. And then you'll decide here what value is appropriate for your particular scene. Realistic is deactivated. and background is active, but obviously there's a picture outside, so that's basically working. And you can save these as another template here. Going further, consistent colors. Let me turn off the shadows here. Let me tone all these down for a second. Hit apply. Consistent colors, there is no artificial light source outside, so between the front and sides of objects, there'll be no differences. And so this wall here is white on both sides. There is no shade and shadow, or light and shade. This is consistent colors. So it tends to create a very flat looking presentation, which is fine. You can again choose to tweak the line weights here. Apply, for example, the line weight got thicker there. You can cast shadows if you like. Here, for example, are cast shadows. I've got them down to 0, so I'll turn them up slightly, and you get some cast shadows in the scene. Ambient seems to work. Yes, it does. Sketchy lines is available. Lighting, for example, again, we'll have to do a little test here. I made shadows 0, but let's test the lighting. Let's turn the lighting up to 100%. No change whatsoever. Let's change ambient light to 100%. No change whatsoever. Notice I do have ambient and cast shadows turned on, and it did nothing to either one of those. Assume those do not work for consistent colors. But what does work is shadows. Here, for example. So again, you have to choose the appropriate shadow to get your desired effect here. And if you like what you see, you save it as a template. And you can have several of these templates, all generating different stylized images for the sake of your presentation. Realistic and background. Oh, realistic does not work, background does. Let's try textures. This is going to replace all the surfaces with materials, textures, basically photographs that have been assigned to the materials that have been assigned to the 3D model of the floor, the ceiling, the walls, so on and so forth. So if you go through here and hit apply, you're going to get the materials being assigned. Let's turn off the shadows for a second here. And let's get rid of the line weights. I'm going to go back to maybe a thin line weight here. The line weights disappear here, for example. So the materials are being applied to the ceiling, the walls, the cabinets, what have you. This is a good spot check to see if the materials, all the material that you're after, have been correctly applied. Some materials and textures don't appear appropriate depending on their characteristics. Some might work better in the realistic mode versus textures. You'll have to pick and choose which method works for you. But here under textures, you can see that you've got the ability to cast shadows. Superimpose it on the floor there. They're very light here. I can tone them up or darken them up here. I do have ambient shadows working here. And let's see, like any other tool, if sketchy lines work. They do, so I don't use that one for now. Lighting, let's turn up the sun 100%, and let's check if the scene got brighter. No. Let's turn up ambient 100%. Did the scene get brighter? No. Ambient, light, and sun have no effect on textures. This is meant to preview textures as no effect on the light except for the shadows, which you'll always have access to. For example, I can make the shadows darker and then tone them down. So those are sort of your guardrails of what is possible using textures. And you see you have to experiment with each of these tools, come up with a list of ingredients that are going to create the desired image, and then obviously save them for future use because you don't want to lose that work. Finally, here is realistic. And realistic lets you show or not show edges here, for example, at the very top of the screen. So now what's happening is under realistic, they do give you a glimpse of what some of the light fixtures are doing in the scene. They're now activated, whereas before they weren't. So now the light fixtures are turned on. You can see them here, as well as the sun. See that little spotlight there showing up on the glass. So you'll get a prelude to what a rendering looks like. This is not a final rendering, but it's a preliminary rendering, a test render, if you will. So you feel free to try these options here. You know, show edges. You know, you can turn off the edges, and you'll get a three-dimensional view here. Albeit this is rather dark, so feel free to adjust these settings here. Even if I turn the shadows off for a second here, the scene is still rather dark. You see here. So let's see if the sun and ambient light have any effect on these shadows. And let's see, we already saw cast shadows. Let's see if ambient appears in this realistic view. So I've got it turned on. Here, I'll turn it off. There, you can see that there is some type of change in the rendering. And if you turn it back on, you can see here, there's a light shadow along these edges, which makes the picture look a little better three-dimensionally. So it adds some quality to the image that is lacking without the ambient shadows. So ambient shadows are great. Cast shadows are very useful, obviously. You can see the sunlight coming in through the windows, although I've got the shadows to 0%. But I'm doing this for testing purposes. Let's see if we can make the scene brighter using the sun. 0, 100% with both shadows activated. Yes, obviously the sun's working in this perspective. So again, you're going to want to tone that down to your desired brightness level to make a decent looking rendering. So we know the sun works. Let's turn the sun off for a second. Does ambient light work? 100%. Very, very slightly it works. This scene got a little bit brighter, but the sun has the most dramatic effect on the realistic view. So ambient is not going to do much for you. You know, 0 to 100. Very, very subtle. I mean, the ceiling may have gotten a little brighter. You know, this one is not going to do you much good, but the sun will definitely brighten your day. Shadows here. Let's go 100% shadows. Hit apply. Yes, shadows are definitely working, and they tend to always work. And then let's tone this down here. Maybe down to here. Maybe further. Maybe what required in this scene is a less dark shadow, but more sun to brighten things up here. Here, for example, there you begin to get a brighter day on the interiors of the scene. Lighting here shows me the lighting scheme here, and you can test and see what effects these have on your scene. Whenever you use realistic, there's different methods to present the rendering. If you're exterior, if you're outside the building, you're going to want to use exterior only. If you're inside a building, you're going to want to use interior only. And then you decide if artificial lights are involved at all. Is the sun turned off and you're just using artificial lights? For example, in a nighttime scene, there's no sun, but there's artificial lights working. You might want to test those scenarios. So here I'm inside the building. I'll use artificial only. And let's see what effect is artificial only on this scene. So artificial only. These lights here are down lights I added to the design. Artificial only. Realistic. I've turned the edges off. I don't want to see the edges because it tends to look obviously unrealistic with the edges turned on. I hit apply. And there you have it. So these are just the artificial lights only. The artificial lights in the scene are currently not strong enough to have an impact on the interiors. They're too dim. The dim is not going to help us because the dim is set up to 100%. It's not making a difference here. In these kind of cases, you're going to want to change your exterior picture to a nighttime scene because right now that looks like daytime. So that's not quite right. But here, the options you have for realistic is the realistic slider here. And if I open up the realism here, you do have an ability here, right here, to automatically change the scene. Hit apply. See here? Automatic. Or you can do it manually. This is a best guess on Revit's part of what the scene should look like with the lights on the inside of the building. And then you use manual, hit apply. And then here you can choose this bar and or type and make it darker or brighter. So for example, you don't want to go too far from the original number. 8 to 6 to 5 might be an extreme change. So let's try here. 3 as an example of brightness from 8 is going to really brighten the scene up. And you see the effect is not something you desire. So we were at 8, let's try 7. If this button is deactivated, choose another field and then it turns itself on. So let's try 7 from 8. This looks brighter and you can see the brightness appearing here in the glass. Again, change the picture outside to make it look like an evening photograph. Heck, you can even go into the background here for the sake of this image and decide that the gradient here, in terms of the ground plane here, the horizon, right there, the horizon is a dark color. Let's just grab blue and make it really, really dark. And then make the ground really, really dark. Maybe make it a dark gray color or something. And that lends itself to the fact that this is an evening rendering. And these are tools you can set up in Revit to preliminary produce renderings, but these by themselves might be enough to create a presentation image that you might like. And so again, you're going to want to tweak these settings here. This is from 8 to 7. Again, maybe 7.5. There's color correction in here, and if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can adjust the different settings here to fine-tune the image. The shadows here, right there, are 20% of the image. If you want to make them darker, you can simply, here I doubled them here, and you can see what the effect is of the shadows. And it's very subtle here, but it's making those shadows a little bit darker. The saturation, again, I rarely use these tools, but you can try your hand at it. That looks terrible. Let's go back here. If you tone it down, it tends to mute the colors. You're heading toward the place where it's black and white. But maybe you want to do a black and white scene. Maybe go this way. There. Just saturation to 0 makes a black and white image, similar to the tool in Photoshop. Again, this was 1. This is the basic color. And then here, this will also brighten up the scene. But feel free to experiment with those as well. And then if you like what you see, you save the template. So then you can reuse this in the future. And there you have it. So that's realistic. Lots to choose from. There's a lot of tools available inside the Revit interface that doesn't necessarily launch an actual rendering, an actual photograph. These are manipulating a 3D perspective view without creating a JPEG, for example. And that concludes our lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to save your templates and apply them to your scenes, and you can create similar results in your projects. Okay, take care. Feel free to post any questions or other tutorials you might like, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye now.